Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. If you give a little more than you take, and if you try to fix more than you break, if you're the kind who takes the time to help a stranger in the rain, there's a place for people like you. If you stand up for those down on their knees and lend a voice to those who cannot speak, if you shine a little light, give sight to the ones who've lost their way, there's a place for people like you. I've heard up there the streets are made of gold, and when you get there, there's a hand to hold. I believe when your days down here are through, there's a place up there for people like you. If you walk around with your heart on your sleeve, and if you're trying to be the change you wanna see, if you lay down your life for love so someone could be saved, there's a place for people like you. I've heard up there the streets are made of gold, and when you get there, there's a hand to hold. I believe when your days down here are through, there's a place.
Good afternoon, everyone. Reverend Michael Walcott, Reverend Dr. Jeffrey Gibson, Dean of St. Michael's Cathedral, but very much a St. Jude's man himself. Reverend Boxall, welcome back. Immediate past rector of the church. Good afternoon, I'm Reginald Farley, for those who may not know. And it is my duty this afternoon to deliver the eulogy for our father, Simeon Farley. Let me, first of all, make an apology for Prime Minister Mayor Honourable Motley, who, as we speak, is in Ottawa, my former stomping ground, my former diplomatic posting, conducting business on behalf of Barbados and the Caribbean. And we have in our presence this afternoon our Acting Prime Minister, Sandy Bradshaw. We have Lady Motley, representing her wonderful daughter, Prime Minister Mia Motley. We have senior ministers, members of Parliament, Mr. Speaker of the House of Assembly, members of the Senate. We have with us as well the current District Superintendent of the Nazarene Church of Barbados, Reverend Dr. Martel Farley, a Fairview man, my first cousin, and another Fairview man, the immediate past District Superintendent of the Nazarene District of Barbados, Reverend Dr. Schofield Eversley. Live 2 houses away. Those of you who know Fairview will know there's essentially a collection of about 4 or 5 families in different permutations and combinations. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful people all. But extended members of the family, friends, I thank you for taking time to be with us this afternoon. But we gather today to celebrate the life of Simeon Farley, and we of course thank Almighty God for the 93 years of life and witness here on earth, and the positive impact which his presence has made on his family, friends, and community. Now, for centuries, epitaphs, that is, short inscriptions on tombstones, have been used to summarize and memorialize the contribution of the deceased individual. In this tradition, if I had the opportunity to put an epitaph on Daddy's tombstone, it would read, Simeon Farley, 1929 to 2023, a builder of Barbados. And you may wonder if I'm just making a large claim. Not at all. Certainly not in the church. In a literal or physical sense, my father was a master carpenter who worked in the construction industry for 60 years. He went in around the age of 12 or so as a young apprentice, and in those days you finished school around that time, and 12 or 14, and he remained after 65 years where people tend to retire. His work was working well, doing great stuff, and he came home on the 60th anniversary of starting work. That was his own choice of timing. And of course, in those days, he worked at Nord, Clark & Tucker, Rotherley, many construction companies building hotels, residences, factories, and so on. So building out the modern infrastructure that we today take for granted. But my father was also one of the many builders of the social fabric and moral fiber of Barbados. They, through their care and love for their family, fearful years of service to the church generally, but this church in particular at St. Jude's, and his contribution to several communities, especially Birds Village, Fairview, and Newbury, the 3 places where he lived, as well as his mentorship to young men who entered the construction industry over time. In fact, it is a curious tale that when I first entered elective politics and I knocked on a door in Breedy's Land, Christchurch, a man answered and he said, how's Lee? Now, anyone asking about Lee could only be deeply close to the family, because as was common in those days, you had more than one name. One official, but the other one was what they call you at home or the community. And growing up, he was known as Lee Gardens. And the guys in the construction may know him as Lee, because his brother and cousins and all of them are in construction. So he said that my father had mentored him when he was a young man, full of talent, but not thinking about saving, not thinking about the future. And that was the memory. I said, no, thank God that it wasn't a case where he unfeared him and they would not get the vote because of that. But such is the battle of legacy. But Simeon Farley was born on December 12, 2029 in the small rural village of Fairview, St. George, to Ernest and Cornetta Farley, better known in our family as Papa and Mama. He was one of 9 children, of which 6 have so far predeceased him: Sybil da Costa, also called Sam, Muriel, Pearl, Neville, and Louis. And 2, Granville, also known as brothers, and Maggie have survived him. Fairview today bears no resemblance whatsoever to the Fairview of 2029. Back then, and even in my time being born in 1961, there was no electricity in the area, no paved roads, no pipe water to the houses, no land tenure, and so on and so on. However, notwithstanding that, and notwithstanding, as was noted by the Mourning Commission in the review of the riots of 1937, that there had been little change in the working conditions of the working class, especially in rural Barbados, for the 100 years since the abolition of slavery. So there can be no doubt that things were tough in those days. But what was important was that notwithstanding those realities, the people of the twin communities of Beard's Village and Fairview raised their families and built a strong community. Mama and Papa, along with the entire community, raised their 9 children with the Barbadian traditional values of love for God, self-respect, neighborliness, and a willingness to work hard. They were determined that their children and grandchildren and future generations should have a better life than they did. From time to time, Daddy told us stories about his childhood and the games they played, the chores they did. His brother, Granville, as I said, better known as brothers, reflected on Daddy with this memory. He noted, and I quote, "Lamont was very creative and loved to make things with his hands. He loved to sing. As children, the family would be engaged in singing at night after dinner. There was no internet or TV. Mama would lead the singing, and Papa and all the children would join in. So loud was the singing that it could be heard as far as the plantation yard. Lamont decided that they needed some musical accompaniment, so he made a box guitar using some wire and wood that he found, and it functioned quite well and added to the family productions. Now, as the children grew older, Papa determined, notwithstanding the law and practice of the day, that you were tied to the plantation. If you stopped working for the plantation, you had to take up your house and move. He determined that on completion of education, that they would not be joining him in the fields of Fairview Plantation. Instead, they were sent to learn the various trades available in those days, and when the opportunity arose, late 50s, early 1960s, with the Windrush program, many of them left to be part of that program. My father and 3 others decided to stay. My father reasoned and explained that by the time the program emerged, he already had a family, he was one of the older ones, let the younger ones go ahead and have a chance. But also, he was looking to the future. Who would take care of Mama and Papa when they got older if everyone was away? And such was his perspective. From an early age, it was his ambition to be a carpenter. In those days, the road to success was not an easy one because there was no Samuel Jackman Prescott Institute, no TVET Council, no training board, any of those things. The only option was to be apprenticed to an experienced craftsman who would, in due course, teach you the techniques and indeed the secrets of the trade. So that he became an apprentice to Mr. Scott in Harmony Cottage. In addition to the expected chores in the non-power tool days of carpentry, planing, sawing, and so on, cleaning up wood, apprentices in those days, you had to cut grass for the master's cows and do all those tasks before you could learn some trade. But my father's perspective was, sometimes you have to eat the cuckoo for the sake of the sauce. And that was a perspective that he shared through life. You have to go along with some things that you may not like for the things that you really want to go for. Good philosophy. He may not be Socrates, but a wise man indeed. And therefore, he did not mind those additional tasks so he could get the knowledge. But as time went by, he reported that he noticed that even though he had mastered all the basics, he wasn't getting any of the higher level skills. Every day, as was those customs, you went home for lunch. And he realized that when he came back from lunch, some fancy work was finished and he had no part of it. So he decided to beat the master at his own game. So for quite a while, he decided to forego that highly optional thing called lunch and hid in the canes opposite the workshop and watched as the master conducted his secret arts and decided to practice them on those days the master was not around, the master workman. And one day, the master workman came back unexpectedly and saw my father working out the delicacies of a curved jalousied window. Remember the jalousied windows? Wonderful work. And he said, "Oh, you're a smarty. I'll have to show you the real thing then." And there he got the secrets of carpentry exposed to him. But as a young adult, my father was not only proud of his building skills, but also his social skills. He dressed well and was in the latest fashion of the day, as you can see from photos. and he loved to dance. In fact, he and his brothers, all tradesmen, and their children are here, they can attest to this, they're tradesmen and making $1 as compared to, let's say, agricultural laborers. And they therefore went to dances in the community, sometimes 2 or 3 a night, and sometimes out of a spirit of utterly reckless generosity. They would buy an entire bar and give it to the patrons as part of their entertainment. Of course, that was not sustainable. But in due course, he won the heart of our mother, Sylvia Headley. They were married in 1955, and the union produced 5 children: Pauline, Myrna, Stephen, Reginald, and Andrea. Daddy worked extremely hard to provide for the family, and while carpentry remained his core income source, he also engaged in other activities to improve his finances. In this regard, Sister Maggie shared the following recollection, and I quote, "Long before the word entrepreneur became popular, my brother had perfected the art. He started by selling small items such as drinks and turnovers from the family home in Fairview. Later, when he married and moved to Beards Village, he started a family shop, which he and his wife managed successfully for many years. He also had a snowball cart from which he sold snowballs on Sunday in the district." And for those kids around, like kids under 45, a snowball is similar to a snow cone, but it was made from a solid block of ice, and you would actually shave it, and you pack the ice in a lot tighter. And in those days, the homemade syrups were more potent and more flavorful, and a snowball could last you perhaps from here to Bridgetown walking in the hot sun. We did a few snowballs this afternoon. Put up a prayer, please. But throughout his life, our father used his knowledge and love for agriculture. I remember the idea was that they wouldn't go to work as plantation workers of the day, not that there was any hate for agriculture. They all pursued agriculture, but as entrepreneurs. But his love for agriculture, he used this as one of his income-earning activities. It was an activity in which a knowledgeable and able-bodied person of the day could put in sweat equity and earn cash. He grew sugarcane, vegetables, and raised pigs. At one point, he actually grew sugarcane on 3 different locations. And in those days, even a 1/4 acre of cane could earn you good cash money when the years came. And I see Schofield nodding his head, he knows. All of us live opposite the cane field somewhere in those days. But as children, we were not permitted to be mere spectators. This wasn't watching TV days or watching anything days. Action was what you made of it. And we were required to do our chores, which had to be done promptly, and in his case, with a high degree of perfection. Generally, the boys assisted with work in the fields, and the girls assisted with work in or around the home. But Sister Myrna reflected, as we all did, and I quote, that he was very businesslike and a good provider for the family. He was a strict father, who on the one hand, I should say, was of the old school view that children should more be seen than heard. But on the other hand, he also had a humorous side. So, for example, on Saturday nights, we played dominoes and other games, and in the case of dominoes especially, he always won. And we figured that he was only practicing on us poor kids to be able to play his friends better during the week. As children, and I continue to quote, we were a bit hesitant to ask him to go places or to do things, since we knew in our mind what the answer would be. Can you imagine when we asked, Daddy, can we do this, can we go there? You know what he would do? He would ask us this question: is it necessary for salvation? And we know that set against such a high, holy yardstick, that the mere worldly and temporal activities in which we wanted to engage could not match up to the requirement. The things we wanted to do were not necessary for salvation, and therefore the answer was no. Of course, like all parents, he did some things that caused us to almost die with laughter. For example, he loved sugar and salt in those days, a very strange twin love that, but that's another story. He repented of those loves later in his life. But one day, Mommy made his tea and brought it to him. And after the first sip, he said to her, quite calmly and quite a friendly manner, he said, but well, Sylvie, the tea here in Beards Village, which is where we live, but the sugar way down in Fairview. And she got the point. We also fell victim, though, to his preferred taste. And one day, when Mommy was in hospital, I believe it was having our last sister, Andrea, she's 7 years younger than I am, and he decided, good man that he was going to boil us some soup and leave it there until we got home from school, and we would have a meal when we got home. And of course, we were very excited. It had all of the real ingredients of a real Bajan soup. And as we went in for taste 1 and taste 2, we found it to be too salty. So we hatched a plan to feed it to the dogs so that he would see our bowls empty and he'll be happy. The dogs agreed with our taste. It was too salty for their palate as well. Our plan failed and we were in trouble. But such were the things that allowed us to have a laugh. But of course, as you know with parents, they graduate. And when they graduate from parent to the exalted rank of grandparent, everything becomes softer. They get soft around the edges. They get smoother to the touch. And they become like Play-Doh in the hands of their grandchildren. So for example, this was no different with Daddy. So granddaughter Anicia shared this remembrance. And she said, one of my favorite memories of Granddad was him teaching me the game of cricket. As a little girl, I would watch cricket with him, and he explained everything to me. I went on to love cricket. Cricket is my favorite sport, and the West Indies my favorite team. All because of Daddy. Now, the West Indies need more people like my father to generate some fans. She continued, my other favorite memory of him is me eating from his bowl for many years as a child. Dad always prepared a large Pyrex bowl for some reason. I never wanted a plate of food of my own. I would wait until Granddaddy was ready to eat, and I would eat from his bowl. She also indicated that somewhere during the process of time, she also was part of the St. Jude's choir as a little girl with her Granddaddy. And she says, I am a full Granddaddy's girl. And such is the nature of parents who are stern as parents and graduate to be grandparents. But all in all, Daddy was strong-willed and stuck to what he believed. This is evident in his belief in God and how we should serve him. He got on his knees and prayed every morning and evening. As children, we could not fall too far from that tree. We were required to attend church, this church, on Sunday mornings. Each of us had to recite the collect for that Sunday before we could sit at the lunch table for Sunday lunch. We tested it one day to see if he was serious, and we didn't partake in the lunch whilst they did until we were able to say the collect. But that put us in good stead for 3 o'clock Sunday school here at this church and even song. Great days, I remember them well. He did not work on Sundays. He worked very hard, Monday to Friday in the firm, Saturday with agriculture. On Sunday, that was rest and worship. He loved the Church of St. Jude's, where he was an active member from around the early 1960s until the last several years when Alzheimer's disease prevented him from continuing active attendance. From his early days at the church, back in the days of Reverend Billy Brathwaite, he was a member of the church choir and was often a soloist at the annual church harvest, because he was among a team of friends and colleagues, great men who in their generation were friends, stalwarts of the church, and men who could be counted on to work hard in the interests of the church and to the glory of God. I cannot think of my father in this context and not mention in the same breath people like Arthur, also known as Nats Miller, Frank Ford, Douglas Gibson, father of Lee and Jeffrey Gibson, Grant Bascom, Stanley Yearwood, Harry Allen, Adrian Curtin, just to name a few, and there were many. My father also enjoyed great fellowship with other groups in the church. For example, in a recent comment with Donna Ford, who, by the way, offers her apologies. She's overseas with the Prime Minister on that official business, but Donna is a St. Jude's person as well, no permanent Secretary, Minister of Foreign Affairs. And she said, I have very good memories of your dad from our days in the youth group and church. He was always kind, friendly, and encouraging to young and old alike. And we agreed that although most of that generation has gone in a physical sense, their contribution to this church and community will never be forgotten. But during our time growing up, Daddy would often tell us that as a young man, he prayed to God that he would one day make it possible for him to get a wife and a wall house. He seems to have prayed very hard, because he got 2 wives and 2 houses. The first, he built himself in 1955 when he got married in Beards Village. That is still standing. It was, of course, expanded over the years. And that's where we were all born and raised, there in Beards Village, next to my mother's parents. And me and Daddy later built another home, this time a larger wall structure, on land that they owned in Newbury, and relocated there around 1988-ish or so. They generously gave the first house to my mother's sister, and that is the nature of how we live in the country. Our family, though, was thrown into shock and a state of mourning by Mummy's unexpected death in February 1997. Daddy took it particularly hard because he had always assumed he would be the first to go. That included leaving copious instructions about the simple, no-frills funeral that he wanted, and the plain pine or deal board box that he wanted, including a promise or a threat or whatever you may want to call it. But he often claimed that he would make the box himself and he would store it in the cellar until he was ready to use it. And my mother would say, if you put it under there, when you're ready for it, take it out. None of us living are going to take it out for you. And I think that kind of put an end of that. But clearly God had plans for a further 26 years of life on earth. In 1999, my father married Marlene Applewhite. 98, I'm reminded. I'm stretching 1998 to get the chronology correct. Yes. We married Marlene Applewhite, who was sitting there. And their friend Lynette Manning reflected on my father and his wife as follows. I don't know if it was because they did not have responsibility for raising young children, but they were more like teenagers than adults. They did everything together, going on walks, going shopping, working in the garden, going to church. They seemed to be able to get almost anything to grow on the land there in the Wari until the African snails and monkeys stopped them in their track. Is Minister Indawe here? No, he's not here. Members of the Cabinet can take that message about the problems there. In addition, they had a knowledge of herbs, and if you wanted a good bush tea, Lynette says Farley was the person to go to. She noted that whatever he put his hand to was done to the best of his ability. He loved his food, his family, and his church. And if there were two persons who would be there at any work session of the church, it would be my father and his wife, Marlene. He loved celebrations, birthdays, anniversaries, and he usually hosted them at his home, and many members of the church have been hosted there from time to time. But at some point, he reckoned that was too much work, and he started going from hotels, from the Hilton to Pomerine and others in between. And she also claims, which I have no doubt, that when the church sponsored this annual walk from here to Oystins, that my father would literally leave people in the dust. And we as children, he was a fast walker. When we were young, we had trouble keeping up with him. He never walked slowly, not even to go from one room to the other. She notes that my father seemed to have a keen sense of timing, and no one had to tell him when it's time to go. She notes some interesting occurrences. September 11th, 2011, the terrorist attack in the United States. My father was there with his wife, and they left on the morning. So he was one person in the world that did not know what happened until he got back to Barbados. Otherwise, he would have been trapped there for a while. She noted as well that with the advancing age and the onset of dementia, he decided when it was time to stop driving, to sell his car. He decided when he was quitting the choir, giving up the various offices, Eucharistic minister, church council, etc., recognizing he could no longer cope in the way that he did before. And she notes, and quite correctly, that he even got his wish with respect to timing, to be able to go to sleep quietly one night and simply not wake up. There was no traumatic event, and that was his way and his wish. As I wrap up, I want to say that in the last few years of my father's life, there was a decline in his ability to function normally due to the worsening impact of Alzheimer's disease. He moved from gradually needing care at home, and a caregiver would come in. Colleen is down here. Yes, Colleen is there. She would come in to assist when his wife was not there, to moving then to a nursing home. And I don't know who's watching the patients today, but the staff of the nursing home is there. I don't know if the patients are here too, but over there. I have never come across such a wonderful group of staff. My father apparently was the life of the party. He even had identified one of the staff members as his wife. It seems like taking wives. But he really wanted to say in all seriousness, Marcia Reese and her team at the Good Citizen Nursing Home really did a fantastic job. They worked with him, and many of them knew him a lot of from the St. George area, and they really made him feel happy. They did tours, they did dancing. They really, really, really give him a good quality life in the last few years. So Reverend Walker, I want to thank you for not only allowing us to do this service in my father's home church, but for also deciding to do him the honor of a requiem mass in honor of the work and witness here in this church. And I want to thank other members of the clergy for attending. I want to thank all of you who took time out on this hot afternoon. You could be doing other important things, but you decided to share a moment with us as we celebrate the life, whilst mourning the loss of Simeon Farley. Finally, we thank Almighty God for the life of our father, Simeon Farley. Rest eternal grant unto him, O Lord, and let light perpetual shine upon him. May he rest in peace.